Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Jeanette Vredenberg. I'm the coordinator for this session today. I want to introduce Anna Soik. She's the city clerk in Alpena, as well as city treasurer and finance director. We're excited that she has taken time from her busy schedule to share important voting information with us.
Thank you.
Doris Feys is president of League of Women Voters of Northeast Michigan and as a retired teacher from the Alpena Public Schools. Thank you, ladies, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to let you know that this program was made available through the League of Women Voters of the state of Michigan. And this PowerPoint also comes from them. So I wanted to give credit where credit is due. I do have handouts if anyone is interested, just for a little reminder afterwards. But the reason why I wanted to do this program and the league thought it was so important was that there is so much confusion over what the voting rights and responsibilities are. And about 3 years ago, Michigan passed a proposal which made it easier to register to vote, much easier to vote absentee, and more the people voted in by a 2-to-1 margin to make voting more accessible. So I'm going to talk about what some of those rules are. And Anna, bless her heart, you heard how busy she is. She is here to answer questions from a real expert. So this was up to date as of October 2021. There have been a few changes just in the past month because it is my understanding that Governor Whitmer has vetoed a couple of bills concerning voting that came to her desk. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Okay, right now in Michigan, and I would like to remind you that all voting rules and regulations are determined by state. So each state has their own requirements for the ballot. In Michigan, you're eligible to vote if you're a Michigan resident and you have been a Michigan resident for at least 30 days. If you are a United States citizen, at least 18 years of age on the election, and not currently serving a sentence in jail or prison. Now, if you have been arrested, not that I think this is the case for anyone here, and are awaiting trial, you're still eligible to vote. But if you have been convicted and you're serving a sentence, you are not eligible to vote. So you can register anytime up to 8 p.m. on election day. If you register early, you have more choices to how you're going to register. You can register in person at your local city or township clerk with proof of residency. And that can be a driver's license, a utility bill, a bank statement, any kind of ID. You can register in person at the Secretary of State. You can go online and register, but you will have to put in your driver's license information. You can send in a mail-in application downloaded from the Secretary of State site. And you can register in person at any state agency that provides public assistance to people with disabilities. Most of these were changes put in after the election in 2018. And again, they show what the other proof of residency documents are, not too restrictive. Next. Now, it used to be you had to give a reason for why you wanted to be voting absentee. It used to be that you had to be planning to be out of town or over a certain age. But since that proposal was enacted, anyone can get an absentee ballot. So all you have to do is you have to request one through an application, and you have to sign for the application. The ballots are available 40 days prior to an election. They have to be returned by 8 p.m. on election day. Some states allow you the postmark and your ballot will be counted. Michigan does not, so you have to make sure it is back before the polls close.
Could I make a comment on that?
Please do.
Okay, so having a deadline of 8 p.m. on election day is it's great for the voter, but it doesn't leave us a lot of time
Right.
to get those, because somebody can come right up until 8 p.m. at the close of polls to return their ballot. And then we have, if we're processing absentee ballots in the precincts, we actually have to run that out to wherever the location is, and they have to sit there and wait until we get there and they count it. Or if the counting board is at City Hall, then we can just run it upstairs and it's quick and easy. But that's one of the things that's a little cumbersome for us. But
Sure.
so I guess we just ask that people return their ballots sooner the better. But certainly you have until 8 o'clock.
And 8 o'clock is really pushing it.
Oh,
what
yes.
if your watch is 5 minutes off?
Right.
And I didn't even think about, for your situation, you have many different precincts. Where I have been a poll worker, we have one precinct and the township clerk is in the same building. So it's not as cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
But my goodness, if you go to all the bother of getting an absentee ballot, filling out the application and getting it, don't take chances. I would recommend getting it in as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And you can vote in person before election day via absentee ballot. And if you're not sure if you're registered, you can go to that website and it will tell you if you're registered. That website's terrific. It will tell you where to go to register if you are not registered. It's just a lot of information through the Secretary of State. Next. And this is on election day. You can register to vote at your clerk's office. I would recommend you do it ahead of time. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. ID is required, or you can sign an affidavit. Now, I have heard people say, Michigan needs a voter ID law. We have a voter ID law. The first thing they're going to ask you when you go to the poll is, can I see your driver's license? Now, I have worked polls where I know the person. I know they're not pretending to be someone else. And it's like, oh, shoot, I didn't bring it. All you have to do is sign an affidavit. Now, this affidavit you are signing is under penalty of perjury. So you don't want to take it lightly. And to my knowledge, no one in this area has signed it and then been convicted of voter fraud, to my knowledge.
Right. I've never heard of that either.
So you can sign an affidavit and the absentee ballots must be submitted by 8 p.m.
We
went through
do
that
actually tally those and send them to the state
before. Okay.
after the election is
Okay.
complete. We are required to submit that information. They track it.
I
Not
read,
specifically who the voters are
Right.
that didn't sign, but how many in each
well,
precinct.
I read recently, it was, I don't know the exact number, but it was something like 81 out of 83 counties had someone sign the affidavit.
Hmm.
So it's, there is, I don't think it's a high percentage at all,
It's not. It's very few.
but people still have that option.
Mhm.
Did you have a question?
You take alternative ID like a passport?
Yes. Correct.
Certainly.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, I thought you were telling me to speed up. Repeating the question was, it doesn't have to be a driver's license. You can take alternative ID. Now, the driver's license, they usually swipe.
Yes.
Other ID, they might have to type in. Some driver's license, they have to type in if it's kind of bent.
Yes.
But yeah, you could take other picture ID. That's fine.
That's actually one of the advantages of presenting an ID is that we can scan it and get an exact match of the voter. Because
Mhm.
sometimes there might be a father, son that have the same name, and sometimes they get the wrong one gets pulled
Mhm.
up. I mean, if someone is in a hurry, the wrong one might get pulled up. where scanning an ID and getting the exact matches is
Yeah.
ideal.
Many years ago, one of my first elections, my mother and I shared the same first name, and I went to vote and they told me I already voted. And it was just a mistake.
Sure.
It was not a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Okay, the turnout in 2020 was huge. Way more than in 2016. And then they list the cities that had the highest turnouts by population. And it's kind of what you would expect, but over 600,000 more voters than the last presidential election. Next.
That election was chaotic.
Oh, it
It was.
was.
Oh
It
my.
was.
Yeah.
I have worked many elections. I worked my first election in 1990, but that one was its own case.
Just lines on the hallways at the
Excuse me.
polling
Mhm.
locations. It was nice to see, but it was
It
we
was
were
hectic.
going all day.
It was hectic.
Yes.
I was there till 2 a.m. and you were probably there longer.
Actually, no, I think I was
Oh,
out before
okay.
that. I might have beat you.
Our precinct did not balance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we
Well,
were off by 2 votes. So I can
Oh.
tell you, there are so many guardrails and triple checks.
Mhm.
Those who claim voter fraud just are not aware of the process at all.
Mhm. Yeah, there's actually a ballot summary that is done at the end of the night,
Yes.
and that's what you're tying out to.
Mhm.
And there's very specific things that you have to enter in there, and it calculates it all for you. And if you're off, you have to find where that is.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
You have to balance.
And we were the problem township because we didn't. We finally figured out what had happened, but it took forever.
Mhm.
Um,
It happens.
And we also had a really high rate of absentee balloting because, as you remember, this was before the vaccine was out and people were so scared of COVID,
Mhm.
rightly so. They
Mhm.
thought that poll places were going to be super spreader events. So next, Ron. Okay, now in 2016 and 2020, Michigan had close presidential elections. In 2016, President Trump won by almost 11,000 votes. In a state the size of Michigan, that is just a tiny percentage. In 2020, President Biden won by almost 155,000 votes. Now, this is probably not news to you that there have been, and there still are, unverified claims of widespread fraud, that somehow the presidential election only was not fair. But there have been so many audits and recounts and court cases and even a report by the the Republican-led Michigan Senate Committee to affirm that the election was fair and secure. I would argue that this was probably the most closely watched election in our nation's history. And in 2016, there were more out of balance precincts in Detroit than there were in 2020. I read that after the election. And I can explain how a precinct would be out of balance because ours was. I'm kind of embarrassed to say, I probably shouldn't say which township, but it was human error. It was not fraud. We had a couple people who were afraid to drop in their absentee ballots because there was all kinds of controversy about absentee balloting. So they came in and we had a clerk mistakenly say, not like a township clerk, a poll worker. She just said, oh, just go ahead and vote it. Yeah, you can't do that because you have to triple check that this person has an absentee ballot and this is the number of the ballot and this is what they're going to vote and this and this and this and this.
Are you saying that somebody brought in an absentee ballot into the precinct
Yes.
on election day and tried to
vote.
put it into the tabulator? Yeah, that would cause you to be off.
And an election worker told her to go ahead.
Oh, no.
Yeah, which was a
Don't wanna do that.
huge mistake. But that was why we were off 2 votes. So we finally caught her and said, don't say that. They have to surrender it and then get another one. But to make a long story short, that was 2 votes out of, I don't know, 1,200, 1,500. So we're not even registering well, maybe a small fraction of 1%. It never would have changed the outcome of the election. Okay, so the election, please rest assured, the election was fair. It was not stolen. Next. Okay, now, there is a thought, though, that perhaps Michigan election laws need to be tightened up in spite of the overwhelming support that Proposal 3 had with the electorate in 2018. So some of the proposed changes include moving a primary election from August to June, training for election challengers, flag dead voters. I'm not really sure what that would be, except to improve the process where if someone passes away, they're taken off the voter rolls.
So if they've already voted, this actually happened to my father. He passed away in October of 20. He actually returned his absentee ballot before he passed. And it was actually pulled, like it didn't count because you have to be alive on election day. And we've encountered that. They automatically, they come out, they're taken out of the qualified voter file.
Okay.
And yeah, our count, we balance our absentee ballots every single day so that we make sure. And if something comes off and we have an extra ballot because that deceased voter has come off of the voter file, then we're off and we find it.
So you find it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we
Okay.
set it aside and it does not get counted.
And I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Wow. There are bills, Senate bills and House bills too, to change election law, including changing the laws for voting registration, for voting election administration, to increase the power of partisan challengers, and to change how laws are certified. Some of those bills are still in the works, some have been vetoed. Next. And here's just a little reminder about the cumbersome method of passing laws. Goes from the Senate committee to the Senate for a vote. And then it goes to the House Elections and Ethics Committee. And from the committee to a vote, and then back to the Senate, and then to the governor, who can sign or veto a bill. If she vetoes, Republicans can try to override the veto by a 2/3 vote, which would be 38 senators. Out of 38 senators, you'd need 25 to override. In the House of Representatives, you would need 73 to override. To my knowledge, none of the bills that she has vetoed have been overridden.
I'm not sure.
I don't think so,
Okay.
to my knowledge. Next. Okay, now this was as of end of October. So there were 39 bills. Most are still in the committee. Senate Bill 303 requires new identifying information to register to vote and to obtain an absentee ballot. And it eliminates the use of affidavit at the polling place. So if you forgot your license, then what you would have, it would be put as a provisional ballot, and you would have to take your license in within a certain amount of time.
I think it's 6 days.
6 days to your local clerk to verify. Question?
You're already registered to vote. Do you have to go jump through some hoops to continue to be able to vote?
The question is, if you're already registered to vote, do you have to jump through some hoops to continue to vote? not in Michigan. Now, other states have said if you haven't voted in 2 years or 4 years, they'll kick you off the poll.
2 general elections.
2 general elections. Okay. So that'd be 4 years.
Yeah, we
Correct.
actually just cleaned up our voter rolls. I think we took about 140 registered voters out because they hadn't voted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Just to clean them up.
is that, so in Michigan, if you haven't voted for how long can you be?
I believe it's 2. I did bring my
Okay,
elections
because
Bible.
this is something I wasn't aware of. That's what I
No.
thought Michigan, but
There's so much information on here. It might take me a little while.
so you might want to go to that www.michigan.gov and make sure.
Anyway, but I was just thinking, what are they gonna do to us here? So. It's an executive tax.
Well, some of these things would make it harder to vote.
Yeah, I realize that, I don't understand.
And while she's looking, there's another question.
Well, and you might be able to explain that, what kind of ID do they want besides our license?
Well, not everyone has a license, so any state ID or college ID with a picture.
Mhm.
And I think a pay stub would work.
That is for
But this is
registering to vote.
this is for this is in the proposed election if they eliminate the affidavit. So I'm not real sure.
And that is decided yet,
Yes.
but to register to vote, as we speak, you need to have some kind of photo ID.
Some photo ID, right?
Okay, I found the answer. It says a voter record is placed in the inactive file when the person goes 6 consecutive years without voting, or when a confirmation notice is sent to a voter after the clerk receives reliable information that the voter has moved.
So it's 6 years. But if they are in the inactive file, can they still vote?
It would probably be, they would probably have to show proof of ID.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
These are
Because
things that we don't deal with too often. so I
not
don't know
very
off the top
often.
of
I
my
remember
mind.
when I was clerk, there was an active file, there was an inactive file.
Mhm.
And I didn't even realize they were still doing that.
Yep.
Because I haven't been clerk in a long time, but I remember sending out postcards, especially with young people who move a lot. It was hard to keep track. Okay. Now, this is something that one of the bills eliminates the use. No, I already did the affidavit, but eliminates the Secretary of State or clerks from providing absentee ballots without an application. Well, you have to have an application now.
Yeah.
I wonder, I think some of the provisions are, they would bar a clerk from sending out an application unless it were requested. And if I remember correctly, in fall of 2020, the Secretary of State sent an application to all registered voters
That is correct.
because there was so much fear of the pandemic.
Right. And that is not a normal process. We
No,
only
that's
normally
unusual.
send ballot applications to those on our permanent absentee list who have told us or indicated in writing that they want to be on that list.
And I would think that would, without an application here, I'm thinking that would suffice that because they have requested for a ballot application. Now, there are also interest groups that send out applications for a ballot. A
Mhm.
friend of mine said, why am I getting all these applications to vote? I said,
Yeah.
that's because everybody wants you to vote, but you only get to vote once.
Mhm.
just fill out one.
And
And
we do
there's-
receive duplicate applications, and
Oh,
of
okay.
course, we keep track of all of that qualified
Excuse me.
voter file system. And we make sure that the person only gets one ballot. I mean, it'll
And I could
flag. if
see
we
maybe
receive-
somebody who's confused thinks, I thought I sent this in, but maybe I didn't. So maybe I should do it to be sure. I don't know.
Mhm. And that's
but,
fine, we'll catch it.
But that is, see, that's the point. It will be caught
Mhm.
and people do not get an additional ballot just because they ask for one.
Yeah.
So,
We do prefer to use the applications that we have because we print a barcode on there and it's easy for us to scan it,
nice,
brings it right up.
nice.
Whereas the ones that are in the paper, they're mailed to you, through political interest groups, those don't have barcodes on them.
And it gives you one extra step to
Right.
do,
But we'll
which
still
is-
find it anyway, even if it doesn't
which
have
is
a
hard to
barcode.
do when you're strapped before an
Mhm.
election. But okay,
Mhm.
and there's another website for the League of Women Voters for more up-to-date information. Next. Okay, now the red ones, the red printing is the reason for the veto on this proposed legislation. The House Bill 4492 allows for the expansion of polling place. It was kind of vague. I think that's why she vetoed it. The House Bill 4528 requires the Department of State to establish comprehensive training for all county clerks, political parties, organizations, and organized committees of residents wishing to become election challengers, but they didn't allow for funding of that. House Bill 4837 blocks third parties from accessing the qualified voter file. Third parties have no access to the qualified voter file, so kind of a moot point. And this one, House Bill 4838 bans voting machines from being connected to the internet. They're not connected to the internet. That is already the rule. Did you want to make a point?
Sure. A few years ago, we used to use modems so that we could transmit results quicker to the county clerk. But the fee to maintain those was outrageous. So we quit using them countywide.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Bonnie Fredericks decided to not support that anymore. And we just,
Well, and
in
it's,
the whole entire county, we don't use them,
so
as far as I'm aware.
the results are physically taken into the county clerk, correct?
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
I discovered that now Kona County, they actually send sheriff's deputies to come and pick up the results.
Oh.
So it's still, they are secure. And there's no chance for any tomfoolery between the
Yeah.
precinct and the county clerk.
Yeah, they are definitely not hooked to the internet. There are two memory cards that get put into the machines during the preliminary testing process to get
Mhm.
everything set to go. Everything is sealed up. Those seal numbers are written in the poll book and everything is verified. And that's the only time that any sort of computer
Mhm.
work is done on it.
Mhm.
Those are all programmed by the county clerk.
Mhm.
And at the end of the night, we snip that seal and then we pop those out and take them back to the county clerk.
No chance for fraud?
No.
Okay. Let's see. County clerks would have been allowed to remove dead voters from the qualified voter file by updating it at least once per month. Now you do that as a city clerk.
Yeah, we do that, but it kind of happens automatically.
Okay.
When we get a notification, I'm not even sure where it pulls from, honestly,
Okay.
but it comes right out of our rules.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to figure out what the
I'm
what
not
the
sure.
time lag is.
Yeah,
You know,
And I'm
from-
not sure of the specifics on that. And then there was a final one about initiative petitions being filed at least 160 days before the election, if they weren't enacted by the legislature, as well as establish a 100-day period for canvassing of petitions. So That's some of the changes they are proposing. But that was already vetoed by the governor. Okay, next. All right, you can get a complete copy of the list of bills, current status and the league's position on all those bills at the league's state website. And if you really need some exciting reading, you can look up the minutes and testimony and look up the bills and see an analysis, if you're suffering from insomnia or something. But it is good to know that all of that information is out there and it's pretty transparent. I think that is my last slide. Oh, okay. Oh, no, there are a few more. I just remembered. Stay informed and help show people the 2020 election was safe, secure, and fair. I'm not really sure how to do that. If someone is convinced that the election was stolen, I don't know how you convince them otherwise. I wish I knew. I worked the following election and someone came in who was convinced the election was stolen. And the next election, it was like a millage, so it was a real small one in the spring.
The one in May?
Yeah,
Yeah.
where
the
like 8 people
911
voted.
surcharge.
Yeah.
Feels like it.
So he was there for a long time and he was surprised. He assumed that the machine was hooked up to the internet. And once he talked to myself and to the township clerk, I hope he was convinced that the results were fair. But if people are prone to believe that theory, it's really hard to dissuade them.
So we also have our electronic poll books that, they're laptops. They can be hooked to the internet, but we are required to put them in airplane mode.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
So that houses all of the data that we downloaded the day before the election, of all the absentee ballots that have been issued and returned, all the registered voters, all of that information is in there. And that's what is being used when somebody comes in to register to vote and we scan their ID and they're found in this database that we've downloaded the day before. But that is not connected to the tabulator where the results are.
So what that is like a list of eligible voters, but it doesn't have anything to do with the ballot information.
As far as like what's on the ballot?
Correct.
No, it doesn't.
I just want people to be assured that the ballot is secret. And because the qualified voter file is electronic, there is no connection between how people voted and the name on the voter file. The tabulator records how the vote was, but you can't tell by putting it in how that person voted.
So those memory cards that I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
So those are actually scanning a picture of the ballots. When they're put in, it's scanning a picture of it and storing it on there. But there's no way to connect it to whose ballot that is.
Okay.
It's not taking a picture of the voter. It does not have, at that point, the stub has been ripped off.
Right. So you
it's,
can't even
you don't
say
even know what
it was.
number it is.
Yeah. And I can tell you by experience that when the poll worker rips off the stub, if they forget to do that, the tabulator will not accept the ballot. Because I've made that mistake before. Don't tell the county clerks, right?
It's actually, a lot of it is the size of it is programmed in there. And
Yes.
if it's too long with that stub on there, it's going
It'll
to reject
reject
it.
And if it's too short,
It's too short, yeah.
it will reject it
Mhm.
or it will get jammed, but that's another story.
Mhm, yeah.
Okay, next. Okay, now our current Secretary of State has an agenda to promote the vote, I would say, just to make sure that to guarantee access to the ballot for eligible voters. And some of her ideas include requiring absentee ballot applications to be mailed to registered voters every federal election cycle. Require counting of ballots postmarked by election day or received shortly thereafter. That is not the law in Michigan now.
Mm-mm.
Some places, as long as it's postmarked on election day, they have to count the vote. Well, of course, that's going to make the ballot counting take longer because you're going to want to wait a few days till all the late ballots come in. Establish early in-person voting at clerk's office and satellite offices prior to election day, and make election day a state holiday. Now, and for an infrastructure to increase the security of the infrastructure, allow processing of absentee ballots 2 weeks prior to election day, provide an additional week for the county canvass. Usually the Board of Canvassers meet right after, like the day after or 2 days after election day.
Correct.
Allow recounts of precincts with clerical errors. Consolidate May and August elections into one June election, and provide dependable funding for local election officials. And to secure elections, to prohibit deceptive election practices, prohibit open carry of firearms, and require election challenger and election working training. Are people allowed to carry firearms into a voting place?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
I was on Good Morning America, on November 3rd of 2020 on the biggest election.
oh, you're kidding.
I was on Good Morning America because of probably a week prior, I got interviewed by the Detroit Free Press about guns,
Yeah.
open carrying in the precincts. And Good Morning America picked up on that story and they liked what I had to say. And so they did an interview with me, and probably only about 15 seconds actually made it on air. But it was interesting. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that if we don't make such a big deal out of it, it won't be.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we say you can't bring that in here, then it's an issue.
Right. Then people get defensive about it and it could become an issue. If we just, let sleeping dogs lie,
Yeah.
it'll be fine. That's my feeling
Kind
on
of
it.
gives me the heebie-jeebies though,
It does.
but.
Yeah.
Okay. And what do you think about making election day a state holiday?
I'm in favor of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it means workers getting the day off so that they could become election workers, that would
Now
be
that would be
ideal.
sweet. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that.
It gives us a broader pool of people to choose from.
I can tell you, we, as part of this grant program, we are going to be doing a program in January on clerk engagement. So you're probably going to get a letter. I haven't sent them out yet. I was trying to find the best way to do it. But I wanted to send an invitation to all the township, city, and county clerks in our tri-county area, which is a bunch of people. It's going to be like 35 people. I'm guessing 1 in 10 would come because they're very busy people.
Mhm.
And part of that program is to encourage people to become poll workers because you really get to see the system inside out.
Mhm.
But I didn't even think about that in terms of making it a holiday. That
Yeah.
would give a lot of people time to help out.
Like the other employees that we
Yes.
have.
I guess with in the current environment, you anticipate a problem with getting poll workers?
Actually, right now at the city, we have plenty to choose from. Yeah, we had
okay.
a lot come out last year, a lot of
Nice.
applications I received. So we're all set there in our jurisdiction.
I have heard from other clerks where they are having trouble getting workers.
Mhm.
And I know that some of our best workers chose not to work because of COVID. There were a
Right.
lot of concerns
Oh, yeah.
about COVID.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you sign up to be a poll worker, you have to identify with one of the two major parties.
Mhm.
And the clerk is entrusted to balance the poll workers so that approximately half are Republican, half are Democratic. In some of the rural areas where there are not a lot of Democrats, there have been clerks who've had a hard time finding people. So,
Mhm.
but you don't have to work in your own jurisdiction. Do you have to
No,
be in the same
You just
county?
have to be a registered voter in the state of Michigan.
Okay, so it doesn't even have to be the same county.
No.
Okay, so that would,
So I can
Make it
kind of
easy.
explain that process, how we approve those. So yes, I do balance based on political party, and it can be, we had somebody that was of an independent party and he was
Mhm.
able to work too. But we try to balance those as best we can, and then I take it to the election commission. And that commission is made up of myself, our city attorney, and the mayor, Mayor Walagora. We review that list and then we approve it. And they also give me authority to make any adjustments as necessary. I do also send a certified copy of I send a letter and the list of workers to the chairperson of the Democratic Party and also of the Republican Party, so that
Okay.
they have time to review it as well.
okay. A lot of transparency and everything is
Mhm.
above board.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right, next. Okay, now there is an initiative petition. I don't know if it has reached Alpena yet. It probably has. But Secure My Vote submitted an initiative for approval prior to beginning to collect signatures. I haven't seen the petition, but I'm assuming it may be circulated soon if it's not being circulated now. Now, people need to be aware that a citizen-initiated law is a way to pass a law that can circumvent the governor and avoid a vote of the people. This is how it goes. If enough certified valid signatures are submitted and verified by the Board of Canvassers, then the legislature can enact the law or place it on the next general election ballot. Next. Now, part of this initiative mandates that people disclose partial social security numbers when registering to vote. That is not required now. And it also eliminates the use of the affidavit. If a person doesn't have adequate ID, they're given an ID-only provisional ballot. And if they don't confirm their ID, then that ballot does not count. And it requires voters applying for an absentee ballot to include their driver's license or state ID number, along with the last 4 digits of their social security number on the application. That's not required now. And it, as part of this initiative, it prohibits election officials from sending or providing absentee applications unless asked. And I wonder if they're even going to tie in the permanent absentee voter list to that. I don't know. That probably will be decided in the courts, I'm guessing, if this does pass.
Mhm.
And next. Oh, and it bans charitable contributions, including volunteer time, to help administer elections. Right now, charitable contributions and volunteers are allowed. It states that drop boxes close at 8 p.m. on election day, which is already the law. And it mandates clerk offices be open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the 5 weekdays leading up to the election to accept ballots, or that drop boxes be made available for return ballots. That is a new requirement. And I know you work full-time, so you're in your office 9 to 5.
8
at
to 5,
least.
so even
8 to
better.
5. Oh my gosh. But I was going through some of these little townships that have 300 or 400 people. And I'm thinking, well, that clerk's not going to like that, that law.
Yeah.
Because some of these little townships, it's a very part-time job.
Mhm.
Just because there's not that much need. I was township clerk many years ago and my office was in my home. So, but it's asking more of clerks. And it spends $3 million providing free photo ID for those who declare need. That's a new appropriation. And because they're putting that into this initiative, it allows the legislature to adopt the legislation without a vote of the people. And it would block a people's referendum vote after adoption. It also would not be subject to a gubernatorial veto. And it's a quirk in Michigan law that I'm not sure I understand, but it is based on the affidavit. Do you have more information on that?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, next. All right, now at the federal level, we're going to switch everything to the federal now. The U.S. House of Representatives passed H.R. 1 for the People Act, which would expand voting rights, and federal legislation trumps state legislation. The U.S. House of Representatives passed it, but the U.S. Senate has not passed similar bills. And there's several pieces of legislation for the People Act, John Lewis Voting Rights Amendment Act, or Freedom to Vote Act. My understanding is they're all in a holding pattern right now. Next. And there's a couple of websites about the status of the legislation, and the Secretary of State for the fact checks on the security of the 2020 election. And I think the next slide talks about mail and mis and disinformation, if you want to go there. Yeah, misinformation is not intentional. It's just sharing false information without the intent of harm. Disinformation is intentional, sharing false information. And unfortunately, there's a lot of both of those, especially on social media.
Last August, I did a post on Facebook about clearing up misinformation, and it actually went viral. And
Really?
it was shared probably about 1,000 times. I
Whoa.
got calls from all sorts of people, lawyers, and saying that it was very well written.
That might have been why we first contacted her. Does that sound right,
I
Dottie?
think it was actually.
I think it was. I thought, whoa, this is good stuff. So thank you. Thank you. I am not on Facebook. That's just my personal preference, but there is a lot of strange and weird information out there. So
I kind of did it first just for my friends, and then somebody said, "Could you make this public?" And as soon as I made it
Wow.
public, it just spread like wildfire. It took
I
right
think
off.
I think you did a real community service
Aw.
there.
Thank you.
Next. I think that's the last one. Oh, okay. And then, of course, if you are checking information or disinformation, it's good to consider the source, check the date, cross-check information, read past the headline. The headlines are always attention grabbers, and question emotionally charged content. I think there are some sources that they are just designed to rile people up, and question those. Make sure it's legitimate. Okay. Next. Oh, and never quote the bad information. Now, this is interesting. Refer to the bad information without repeating it. If you repeat a lie, I have read that if you repeat the lie, you give credence to it. So you don't even want to repeat the falsehoods that are out there and focus on correct information, including trustworthy sources. It's very sad because in this divided age, it's hard for people to even agree on what's a trusted source anymore. It's very sad.
One of the things you may have heard many times is about the use of Sharpies.
Oh
in
my
the
gosh.
precincts.
Yes.
That was one that I had to
Oh.
clear up.
Yeah.
So when we have a two-sided ballot, the bubbles are actually offset so that when there is bleed through, it's not marking something on the backside. And the reason that markers or Sharpies are used is because they dry instantly. Ink pens, if let's say somebody uses a pen and then they go right to put it into the tabulator, if it's not dry, it can get on the rollers.
Oh, gee.
That's why the vendor tells us to use Sharpies.
Well, I remember I was working a Sharpie election and the ballpoint pens just were not, and maybe it was because they weren't dry, but they did not cover enough of the circle so that it didn't register.
Mm.
And the tabulator is a pretty impressive piece of machinery because if my vote is not going to count, I want to know. So it would say, I don't even remember the phrases, random marks or something like that.
Stray marks.
Stray marks, or if
Mhm.
somebody overvotes a ballot, like one of those kind of arcane Michigan State Board of whatever, and you vote for 5 instead of 4, it will tell you that there's a problem with the ballot.
Mhm.
But the Sharpies, the fine tip ones actually help with the election. And if they did bleed through, there wasn't anything on the other side that it could have picked up as a count for something.
So on those overvotes, if let's say, like your example, you said, somebody voted for 5 instead of 4, and let's just say they mark the rest of their ballot correctly, you can actually still vote that, and it will not invalidate the entire thing because one race is overvoted. It will still correctly count everything else. You can either fix it, you can take it back, redo it, or get a new ballot. Or you can just cast it and it will not count that overvoted race.
Cast as, well, however, I don't remember the phrase cast as. Because that happened to someone at our precinct and we could tell what race it was. And it was one of those state school boards, universities. And she looked at the line of 300 people to go back and she said, can I just leave it like that? And so the part that she was most concerned about was still counted.
Yes.
So.
Yep. The machine will actually tell you when the error pops up, it tells you where it's at. So you can read through.
Pretty sophisticated.
It's very intuitive.
Okay, and next we should be about done here. Oh, Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Are there any questions about this presentation?
And he claims that his daughter received 3 ballots. Now, is that possible? And if it was, and she filled them out, did you catch them?
So we actually, we've received this question many times. And where the confusion is that people may be calling the application a ballot.
That's what I was wondering as you mentioned that. I thought maybe that's what he meant.
That's.
But okay, so if she filled the 3 out, you definitely caught that too.
Oh, certainly. Yes, we would only issue 1 ballot.
And actually
our
tell
system,
him that.
Yes, our system will not let us issue more than 1 ballot to a person.
It
would tell us.
He's in Clarkston.
Yeah.
And I just want to make that straight because I didn't know what to say back.
Right. Yeah, somebody can fill out multiple applications. There's no harm in that, but we're only going to still issue 1 ballot.
And there's no way she would have gotten the 3 ballots.
No.
Okay.
No, our system will not let us issue another one. It'll say, you know, you've already issued one. We would have to spoil it and reissue another one if something was wrong with that first one, but we would never, ever issue somebody.
You know,
We
that makes so
can't.
much more sense.
Mhm.
That's the miss and dis part, isn't it?
Right.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you. You
Mhm.
guys, I'm so glad you were here.
You had a question from Zoom that said, how might the partisan challenger powers be increased? And why should they? What would be the benefit? That was on one of the legislative things.
Do you want to take this or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm not sure
partisan-
exactly what powers are.
Partisan
Looking at it.
challengers can be from the Republican or the Democratic Party. They don't have the right to say that person can't vote here unless they have valid information that that person is not eligible to vote there. I've never seen this happen. I've never seen this happen. But if they, my understanding that in some jurisdictions, they are trying to let partisan challengers certify the vote. My own feeling is that would be a horrendous mistake because you want the vote to be nonpartisan. And everyone, every eligible citizen has the right to vote, but they also need the assurance that their vote counts. And the Board of Canvassers is made up of Republicans and Democrats. They come together and certify the results. I don't see any good reason to make that more powerful for partisan challengers unless someone is strictly interested in partisan advancement rather than having a functioning democracy. That's my opinion.
A challenger is not permitted to challenge a voter's right to vote unless the challenger has good reason to believe that the voter is not eligible to vote in the precinct.
And there were some ugly scenes on election day
Mhm.
at the, I think it's a TCF building, where things were on the verge of violence. And that's just insanity.
Mhm.
I mean, the most civil thing we should do is to be able to go out and vote without being harassed. But there was a lot of malinformation about what happened. So I can't imagine giving partisan challengers, because they're already biased one way or the other. You wouldn't want them certifying the votes. Are there any other questions? Well, I would like to say thank you so much for giving us your time and expertise and wisdom. I so appreciate you coming out here to share
Okay.
with us.
Thank you. You are very welcome. I appreciate the invitation, and it's always fun to talk about elections.
Oh.
I still have plenty more to learn, but
Oh, well, you sound very, very knowledgeable. And it is a confusing subject.
oh yes, it's always changing too.
Doris and Anna, we just want to thank you for coming.
Oh.
It was very informative.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.